This is Baxter Colburn, host of the Verse of the Day podcast. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey, this is Jerry Strauss, host of Hollywood Happy Plays here on Public House Media. Thank you for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. And once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Hollywood Happy Plays, where we talk with and about all of your favorite names from the worlds of TV, movies, music, whatever entertains you. We are getting up close and personal with those people right here on HHP. A new show comes out every 2 weeks, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Hollywood Happy Place. Thank you again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. Find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. Poppie is spelled P-O-P-P-I-E, and if you haven't figured out how to spell Daniel yet, you should probably not listen to this podcast. If you want to read something that is similar to this podcast, maybe something that I wrote, if you want to read something that is more organized than this podcast, because you know that I like to go off on tangents, you can check out my blog that is on danielpoppie.com. You can also check out the other stuff on there. You can follow How to Write Good on Facebook and Twitter if you enjoy the podcast. And this podcast, as always, is brought to you by Public House Media. Hope everyone is doing well. I'm doing okay. It's almost the beginning of the summer, and that's kind of weird. Or it pretty much is the beginning of the summer. So the word of the week, and again, if you didn't listen 2 weeks ago, because last week I had a guest on for May. If you didn't listen 2 weeks ago, it's still May. I don't even know what day it is. If you didn't listen 2 weeks ago, I'm going to be having the etymology or the what do you call it? The history of the word, because I think that's interesting as well. And I know that you want to know the etymology because you're into that stuff. It still is May. It's just the 30th. So this week's word is worry. And you probably know what worry means already. If you don't actually speak English, you might not know what worry is. I don't know how you're understanding what I'm saying, but good for you if you are. If you don't speak English, but you're able to understand everything, that's great. Worry is essentially allowing yourself to be anxious or uneasy or dwelling on difficult things or your troubles. And I hope you already know that. So hopefully you're not worried. So this is kind of an interesting thing. The etymology of worry is interesting. So the etymology, English, the word worry comes from the word, and I don't speak Old English, so bear with me. It comes from the word wyrgan. It's W-Y-R-G-A-N, and it's related to the word strangle. I think that's really interesting. So if you want a different picture, think of it like this. So I'm not sure these words are related, and the etymological dictionary didn't say they were related, but the word wring, like you're wringing out a towel, may be related to the word worry, because strangling is similar to wringing out a towel, or you could wring someone's neck, you know. My microphone's being stupid. I have to talk into it closer. All right, so that is the word of this week, worry. So don't do that. All right, so for our accidental essence, because we're jumping right into that, we are going to be talking about how to kill your creative process. So I hope this is a very, very good accidental essence for you. But let's first talk about creativity. I've talked about creativity in the past. Let's give a quick recap on it. I know some other people, you may completely disagree with me on creativity, and there's been a lot of learning I've been doing and thinking I've been doing on creativity. So don't worry, like if you think that I know anything, don't worry, because I change my mind. I have certain ideas that kind of stay the same, and if they stay the same, even though I think about them a lot, I tend to be like, well, maybe they are right. Creativity is something that I just haven't completely got I haven't gotten a firm grasp on yet. So it's something really difficult to figure out what it is and what it does and why it does that. And I think it's one of the most interesting things about people, that someone can take something, they can make something beautiful, whether it's through writing or whether it's an object or whether it's a painting or anything like that. I think that's a really cool thing. Or they can just make something interesting, not even beautiful, but just interesting, because you don't necessarily have to make something beautiful. Not everything creative is beautiful. So creativity, what I've described it as in the past is you have all these options and you're able to see all these different options and you're able to pick the best of all these different options. All right. Another way you could think of it too, because I don't think that's the whole of creativity, right? I think there's more to creativity than just all picking from the best options. Maybe I've said that, but I disagree with that if I've said that in the past. But besides that, I think it's also you're taking different pieces and you're putting them together in unique ways, right? If you think about it from a design principle, so think about it just as shapes, right? That's the most basic type of design you have. If you think about creativity like that, you are taking shapes and you're putting them in a space, right? It's a flat, two-dimensional space, and you're putting them in a specific way, and maybe you're connecting them in a specific way to make them unique, to make them appealing to the human eye. So I think that I don't think it's something that just someone has, I think that you can develop creativity, and I think that everyone does have creativity to a certain degree. It's just there's people who exhibit it a lot more, and I think that the way I described it, and it's taking the different pieces, putting them together, you do have to see, you do have to be able to see things in a different way, and I think you can train yourself to see things in a different way. I really do think you can train yourself to be creative. I really do. I know that there's probably people who are in psychology and maybe cognitive science who maybe disagree with me, but I think they would have to agree that to a certain degree everyone is creative, and it's not something that is just for the super intelligent. There is a certain degree, I think, of intelligence that goes along with creativity. I'm not a super intelligent person, so if you think that you can't do a podcast, you can definitely do a podcast. But I think there's a certain degree of intelligence that goes along with creativity, but it's not something that's extraordinary. It's not something that is out of the ordinary. It's not having 180 IQ. It's not being an Einstein. It's just there's what intelligence is as we view it today. If you can't remember this, or if I haven't talked about it before, all intelligence is, and how they view it with the intelligence tests, is you taking in information and how fast you can take in information, how fast you can process that information, and how fast you can manipulate that information. And it doesn't have to do with the different combinations you can do with that information, right? It's just the speed, it's just the weight, it's just how well you can manipulate that information. Whether that information is visual, so you have a cup and you can turn it around in your head, right? It's you have an image in your head of a cup and you can move it around and you can see it from different areas, or you can memorize a string of words. So yeah, but with creativity, I don't know, like, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. I could very well be wrong, but I do think it's something you can develop, and I think it's something that I've developed more as I've gotten older. And there's certainly ways you can kill it. Let's just say that, and I'll explain how you can kill creativity. But we're going to move on a little bit. So before we learn how to kill creativity, because killing creativity is really important, we need to learn how to get to creativity. Okay, so if you have never heard of the creative process, I don't know where you've been your whole entire life. Either you are about 8 years old, which I guess you could listen to this and maybe you've got some interesting stuff out of it. That's good for you. Maybe that this is on the level of an 8-year-old. I don't know what to really think about that if this is on the level of an 8-year-old. But that's okay. Maybe it's still intelligent stuff, but I'm just speaking in a way that anyone can understand. But if you haven't heard of the creative process and you're an adult, or you haven't heard of the creative process in quotes, and you're an adult, I don't know where you've been. So you've heard of this, and most people, I guess I have something like this too, but I've never really called it a creative process. I've never said, oh, this is my creative process. I've just kind of done stuff. I'm like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm making. But a lot of people who are creative have a creative process. And I think I've talked about this in the past, so I probably will repeat myself. But I know that there's been authors. I'll just talk about writers, for example. I think writing is a unique type of creation, a unique type of creating. Let's say that. I think it's a unique type of creating because it's bringing together two different things. It's bringing together something logical, which is the spoken written word. The written word has to be logical. It has to make sense, right, to someone else. And you are also bringing together the ideas associated with creativity. You're bringing together bigger ideas. You're bringing together what you're trying to convey to someone that if you were going to make music, it would be a lot easier, because music, you don't have to explain you don't have to explain things in a way that put people in a specific. You don't have to. How am I trying to describe this? So in music, you play specific notes, and they are parallel to specific emotions, right? If you have, what is it called? It's not lower notes. If you have a minor key, it's sad. A minor key sounds sad. A major key sounds happy, right? Generally, I'm sure you can do other things with it. I don't know tons and tons about music, but so with that, you just play a minor or a major key, and you've kind of got your basic mood that you're playing, right? Well, with writing, you don't have a basic mood. You have to put people in a specific position. You have to trick their mind into believing they're kind of taking part in the story, and then you have to have them experience something that puts them in that mood, okay? So I think that writing is a little different than other things, and I think it's a lot more powerful if it's done right. It's harder to read. It's hard to experience. I think it's harder to get across to people things in writing because people talk so much, because everyone talks. So I don't know if musicians or traditional artists like painters or sculptors do this, but writers have a creative process that's really interesting in a lot of ways. So there's been writers in the past who dress up. They completely dress up when they write. I know that there's some writers, I think, that they smoked when they wrote, or they always drink coffee, or they have a specific thing they always do. It's kind of like a ritualistic thing. And the reason they do that is because maybe in the past they've done this before, and it allowed them to get into a mindset of writing. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. Maybe I will. And then they can write better. So they have a specific creative process, and they put themselves in the mood, and then they go through this process to stay in the mood so they can produce something. And I certainly have a way that I do this as well. So when you think about this, a creative process, a creative mindset is different than just regular thinking, right? If you have to force yourself, if you have to do something to get yourself into this type of thought, it's not the same exact thing as just thinking through something and writing it down. I really don't think it is then, right? It's something different. It's not like I've said this I think I've said this in the past. I think that writing is logical. I certainly do. I think there is a logic to writing. I think there's a logic to telling stories, of being creative, of eliciting responses from people. But I think that it's a different type of thinking that uses that logic. It has an underlying logic. It has to make sense within itself, but it's a different type of thinking than just typical thinking. I'm not just thinking through something. I'm not looking at something and trying to figure out what it is. I'm not looking at something and trying to figure out how it works. I'm looking inward. I'm looking at an experience I had, and I'm trying to take that experience and I'm trying to put it on paper so someone else can experience that experience, which is really, really cool that you can do that, right? I don't know. Like, maybe you think that's stupid, but I think that's really cool. I can have an experience, and if I work really hard, well, maybe not work really hard, but if I can write in a specific way, which might take a lot of hard work, I can get someone else to have that experience, or maybe like a shadow of that experience, and have that same emotion. And that's always my goal with writing. I think that's one of my main goals. I'm not just telling a story. I'm trying to have someone experience something else. Okay, so let's move on. I've kind of gotten off, but I was a little excited about that. So this is my creative process, I guess. This is something I've more recently started to think about because I realized that I can't just rely on my moods. I need a way to start doing something. And we haven't gotten to that yet, so I'm getting ahead of myself. This is my creative process. So get really relaxed. Float through my own consciousness. It's daydreaming, right? Get into a flow of writing where I am relaxed and the story washes over me. All right. So I have, when I've talked about how I outline stories in the past. I almost certainly do. I almost certainly believe that I've talked about in the past, right? And so I outline stories. Sorry, I was out to the side of my microphone, so you may have not heard me as well. So I outline stories, and the reason I do this is because I need to know what I'm doing. But at the same time, when I'm writing, I have that story by me, but I'm not paying attention to that outline. I mean, I have that outline by me. I'm not paying attention to that outline in great detail. I kind of look over the outline. I got a hair in my mouth. I look over the outline. I see the general basic structure of the outline on a page, and then I write. And then if the writing is flowing, I just go with it. And then once I finish that writing and I have all this information about the outline, then I stop. I turn the page and I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do next. So I do use an outline. And so I said, I'm going to just reiterate how the process I go through. So I get really relaxed. I daydream. And then I get into a flow of writing. So before I write, I kind of imagine things going on, and I slow down, and I just let this stuff wash over me. It's kind of hard to describe it. It's just kind of drifting through the story by myself. You can put yourself in a daydream. I know that I've done that. Maybe you haven't. Maybe it's harder for you, but you can start to imagine stuff and help yourself play a movie in your mind, and that's always going to help you, or I think it always helps me. And then what I mean by it washing over me is that I don't get these very specific details about something. I get a basic, it's like a big picture. It's like a big, huge wave instead of little droplets, It's not a little stream. It's a wave that washes over me. And I've got to take that wave of thought and I've just got to go with it, right? So what it goes along with that is it's of course a different way of thinking. Like I've said before, it's a larger picture thinking. Creativity is larger picture thinking, I believe. I'm not positive about that. It's definitely relaxed thinking. It's not something that you can just force yourself to do. You need to relax to do it. You need to allow your mind to wander. You need to start having fun. If you're not having fun when you're doing your first draft, when you're writing, you're probably not. I feel like you're not doing writing right. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Maybe you don't want to have fun. I've got a friend who takes forever with writing, and I think it's because he just doesn't relax when he writes. He wants to get everything perfect right away. And I have a goal one day to write one draft, and that's all I write for something. And I think that'd be really cool. But I think it's like in 50 years. Like in 50 years, I want to be able to write one draft of a story, and that's it. Right. But him, and I'm not making fun of him or anything like that, but he just really thinks about what he's writing. And so it takes him forever to write a paragraph. But maybe he just needs to relax. So I think creative thinking is definitely relaxed thinking, right? It's not just forcing yourself to think some way, right? There's a difference between me thinking through how to make something and me just how to make a physical object. I'm not talking about making something creative. There's a difference between being like, okay, I have this material. How am I going to make this material? There's going to be an active thought process, and creativity is more passive. It's not really passive, but it's the best way to describe it. It's like really like a drifting mind. You allow your mind to drift. One thing that really helps me is music. I try to get lost in music before I try to do something. So if I'm not in a mood to make anything, sometimes just like listening to music and just daydreaming and drifting off in the music helps me make something, if that helps you as well. And then what you do is you catch your daydreams, You catch your daydreams and you put your daydreams into words. And so if you've ever heard of lucid dreaming, I can't lucid dream, but if you don't know what lucid dreaming, it's essentially where you realize you're dreaming and you stay in the dream and you kind of do whatever you want in the dream. I know a guy who's like, like when I realize I'm in a dream, I start lucid dreaming and I always fly. Now the issue with me with lucid dreaming is I always wake up. Every single time I realize I'm dreaming, I wake up. But if you're a lucid dreamer, you can control what goes on in your dreams. Now, if you're a lucid daydreamer, you can kind of direct your daydreams, right? One thing I do, and this is kind of weird, and I know everybody has their own thing. One thing I do to stop focusing on all the other things I'm writing is I put my face right near, and I'm actually doing it right now, I put my face really near the paper so I can only see the line I'm writing on. And the reason why I do this is because I don't want to focus I want to focus on the big thought in my head, right? I don't want to focus on every single thing I put down on paper already. I only want to focus on that one line that I'm writing, and I want to focus on the big thought in my head. I don't want to lose that thought. I want to get it out before it's gone. All right. And I think brain science is actually behind this idea that it's kind of more like daydreaming. So maybe theories on this have changed, but there are two hemispheres in your brain. One of the hemispheres deals with more logical thinking. One of the hemispheres deals with more visual thinking, right? There's actually different areas of the brain. There's different sides of the brain. Sorry about that if you heard that. There's different sides of the brain that deal with different type of information. And when you are creating something, you are trying to kind of drift into more of a visual or a sensory thing. Maybe not necessarily even visual, but you're trying to imagine what something looks like in as many details as you can, appreciate it, what it looks like. You're trying to feel something. You're trying to imagine what something feels like, what something tastes like, what something hears, what sounds like, not hears like, what something sounds like. And then you're taking that with your more logical, with your more verbal mind, and you're putting that on paper, and you're translating it into words, essentially. And that kind of comes from the idea that there's two hemispheres, and both the different hemispheres of the brain, the left and right, have different functions a little bit, and they work together. Like one thing that I think is annoying, and it's been annoying for me for a really long time, is that people are like, are you more of a right brain thinker or are you more of a left brain thinker? And the truth is that you're both. Okay? The truth is that you use both hemispheres in your life. In some cases, like in being creative with to write something, you need to kind of slip into a more visual, more sensory type experience, so you can catch things going on. But you can't write without your left hemisphere, right? The right hemisphere is supposed to be more feeling. There's going to be trouble. So we're gonna actually talk about how you wreck your creativity. And the best way you can destroy your creativity is being worried or having anxiety. Okay, and I've talked about this in the past. I deal with anxiety, and it's kind of surprising. You look at how much I deal with worry or anxiety, and you look at how much stuff I actually make, and I'm surprised at myself, because there's some times where I sit down and it's just really, really hard to do stuff. You kind of go into autopilot, and I'm trying to make something, and I just can't make something because it's so difficult, and I just have to maybe stop and do something else. So if you are worried, if you are anxious, you'll destroy your creativity, and this is the reason why. So as I was talking about before, creativity is kind of like drifting, right? Creativity is kind of letting your mind go, and it's think of it as herding sheep. Okay, when you herd sheep, there's always going to be sheep who are straying, and you may not be able to take them and go directly to where they need to be. You may need to go around them and push them in a direction. Then you kind of shift them, and you're not in complete control of those sheep. Okay, and that's what creativity is like. You are trying to take what's going on in your brain, you're trying to push it a different way. And it has to go in different ways. When you're creative, there's a lot of different connections being made in your mind. And it's connected more based on it's based on memory, it's based on experience, it's based on sensory experience or your own experience in your life. And you're putting all that together, you're synthesizing something. But anxiety, what worry is you just spinning around one idea, one thought over and over again. And that's what worry is. And that's why worry kills your creativity. Because when you're creative, as I said before at the beginning of this episode, when you're creative, you want a lot of different ideas. You want as many ideas as you can have. And you want to pick the best idea and put it together in the best way. Well, you have to have as many available options as you can get if you want the best ideas, right? But if you have worry or if you have anxiety, all you've got is one option. And you may, and there certainly is a certain degree there certainly is a degree that you can think outside your anxiety, right? You can force yourself to think, you can force yourself to be creative, but despite that, it's kind of like being creative when you're in pain. That's a little difficult too, but it's a lot harder because you're kind of locked in a cycle. You're just circling around that. And that I would say that worry and creativity are fairly opposite. I don't know if they're the exact opposite, but they're pretty opposite. I would say that I don't think that logic and creativity are the opposites. I think that being stuck on one idea over and over and over and over again is the opposite of creativity. Okay? Because if you can't get away from that idea, you can't be creative. And I think that's true. I may be completely wrong about that. So what can you do to deal with that? So what you need to do to deal with worry and anxiety, and of course I haven't figured this out completely either, but I've got ideas. What you do is you stop, right? You stop and you do something that is enjoyable to you. You try to get out of the bad mood. You try to break that thought cycle. What I was talking about before is that listening to music before I do something creative helps, and it especially helps with worry or anxiety. So the thing about music is just crazy. What you can do is you can actually listen to music that mimics your mood, because anxiety and worry put you in a bad mood. If you're worrying or you're anxious, you're probably in a bad mood, let's be honest. But it mimics your mood, and you get caught up in that, and then you kind of use that to drift off away from the worrying and anxiety, because it's mimicking your mood, and you kind of feel that experience in a different way. You're experiencing your worry and anxiety. You're experiencing your bad mood in a way that isn't verbal. It's not just spinning around that one idea. And you could probably slowly shift your music away from that and toward another idea, away from that minor key or whatever it's in, and toward something that is more useful for you. I know that when I've dealt with anxiety a lot, I've talked about progressive rock. I listened to progressive rock a lot when I dealt with anxiety, and the reason I did is because it has a lot of instrumental music, and sometimes you need a song to last 20 minutes. Let's be honest. Like, you can't break out of that anxiety in a 6-minute song's time period or a 3-minute song time period. You need something that lasts about 20 minutes, and you listen to that, you get caught up in it, but you're still worried or you're still anxious. Maybe it's the same thing. And then you finally break out of it because you kind of get swept up in the song. So that might help you. But yeah, if you completely want to kill your creativity, just be worried about something. It'll work really, really well. That is the end of our accidental essence. We're going to talk about the logical fallacy of the week. The logical fallacy is the broken window fallacy. So this is better understood by the typical example that's given with this. So the broken window fallacy, it's called that because if you break a window, you could say, well, it doesn't matter that I broke that window because there's gonna have to be someone who fixes that window, and that person's gonna get paid. So in the end, it's actually gonna help that person who fixes the window. Like, it's gonna give them money. But the person who says that, they don't take into account the cost to the person paying for the thing, because that person may have needed to use that money for something else, but now they have to use it for a broken window. Okay, so maybe their kid, the typical thing is maybe their kid needs shoes. Well, they can't get their kid shoes because they need to fix the window. If you want to have it in words that don't make any sense, it's disregarding the opportunity cost. Well, if you're in finance, you'd understand it. It's disregarding the opportunity costs associated with destroying the properties of others. What I believe, I'm not going to look it up because it might take me too long. I believe the opportunity costs are costs that you have to put towards something instead of something more beneficial. I believe that's the case. Or you have to give up something else to because of these costs. In this case, you have to pay for the window and give up the shoes. So that is the broken window fallacy. I think this would also apply to people throwing trash on the ground. I think people throwing trash on the ground and being like, oh, well, this person here, that's their job to pick it up. If you're one of those people, I want to slap you because you're a jerk. That is all I've got for this week. yeah, I hope you have a really good week. I know that I know there's likely people who are out there who are like, yeah, I really like writing and I really like making, and even if you don't like writing, if you just like making things that are like, if you're creative, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm taking a book and I'm self-publishing it. I'm self-publishing it, and I'm making I could make a book and I could publish it regularly. It would take a lot more time to get to the point of actually being published. But the reason why I'm doing that, and I've been thinking about this more and more, is that it allows creativity. One thing that I really like about music is that there's a lot of things going on in music. And people just try different things. An artist that I like a lot is Sufjan Stevens, and I don't like all his stuff. But one of the reasons why I like a lot of his stuff is because he's willing to try stuff, right? He's willing to put out an experimental album. And in writing, in books, for the past hundreds of years, you had to, and you could do stuff differently with music because it was smaller, right? But with books, you kind of had to go the way of whoever was publishing the book. There was a bigger cost associated with publishing books, so you couldn't do whatever you want. You had to fit into their mold. And I've just been thinking about the possibilities that come up with making something, that writing something and actually self-publishing it, because you can do whatever you want. Now, what you want to do may not be good. What I want to do may not be good. We'll see about that if anybody likes it. It might not sell at all, but at least it's your thing, you know? At least you can experiment. And before, there wasn't the same degree of experimentation allowed. And I think that's really, really exciting. That's something that just, when I think about the fact that you can experiment more with writing and you can actually publish it and get it out to an audience, and you can work towards keeping on pushing it out to an audience, that makes me really excited about writing, because one of my favorite aspects of writing is creativity. One of my favorite aspects of doing anything is creativity. And when you are going to an agent, so you get somebody who's an agent and that person goes to a publisher for you. When you're going to an agent, I think there's a lot of anxiety associated with presenting your story. And there's a lot of anxiety, well, at least for me, maybe not for you. There's a lot of anxiety with going up to a publisher. Now, I think you should be really critical about your own writing. I think you should look at your writing. You should be like, that sucks, let's make it better. That sucks, let's make it better. Not for the first draft, mind you. But once you're revising it, I think you should keep on going until you think it's perfect, right? Or close to perfect. I don't think it can be perfect. But when you're trying stuff out, and I think you should have people read your stuff. That's another side note, just so it's understandable. I think it should be understandable. But when you're trying stuff out, there's a lot of things you can do with writing these days, just because of the fact that you can put out whatever you want. And I think it's going to be something that really changes the face of writing. I think it will really change the face of storytelling in books. Okay? You don't have to put out a full book. You can put out chapter by chapter. You don't even have to, you can put out a book with 300 chapters and each of them 50 pages long. Right? You could do that. So it's technically a series, but it's one long story. Now that's already been done with Battlefield Earth, which was a very boring book to me. You might love it, but you can just do a lot. I think that's really exciting. There's just a lot of potential. It's always an exciting thing when you can be creative in some area and you don't have people restricting your creativity. And you may fail, and I may misstep, but at least it was my misstep. At least I learned as I went along the way. And I think there's so much stuff that can be learned by people just being able to do their own thing, right? It doesn't, like, if you fail miserably, if I fail miserably, if I don't sell any books, you know, if everybody hates what I wrote, I can just look at why they hated it. I can figure out why, and I can restart again. I can try again, and I can keep on trying until I get it right? So, I don't know. That's cool to me. Don't let worry take up what you're doing. Don't focus on all the negative aspects of what you're doing. Just do what you're doing. After you're done making it, then you should look at it with a critical eye. But don't look at it like that right now. It'll just ruin it. Honestly, you can totally ruin a book if you just worry about it before it's finished. You just got to have fun with it. I think that's the biggest thing. Just have fun with what you're doing as you're making it. So again, as always, my name is Daniel Poppie, and this is How to Write Good. I suppose. I think it is. Have a good rest of your week.